Steve Womack. I was born in Russellville, Arkansas, February 18th, 1957. St. Mary's Hospital on West Main Street. Hospital still stands today.
So, tell me about your parents. Who were your parents and what were they like?
So I was the third of 7 children, born to James Kermit Womack and Liz Womack. Now they divorced many years ago, but both of my parents, as we do this interview, are still living. My mom is 89, will be 90 in December. My dad is 88 and will be 89 in September. Like I said, I was the third in the lineup. I had a brother, then a sister, then me. Then I had another sister, and then there was a gap of 4 years, another sister, and then I think a gap of 2 or 3 years, another sister, and then my baby brother was born, and he's behind me by a number of years. So there were 7 children, all still around, and that was the chronology of the Womack clan as we knew it. I was born in Russellville, and a lot of people misunderstand the fact that while I was born there and graduated high school there, they just assumed I grew up there. But that's not true. I grew up in Moberly, Missouri, because right after I was born, my family moved to Missouri. My dad was a broadcaster. We ended up in Higginsville, Missouri, and he worked at KLEX Radio in Lexington. And then 5 years later, we moved, when I was 5 years old, we moved to Moberly, and that's where I went K through 10. So my growing up years were in Moberly. And then in 1973, my family moved back to Arkansas, to Russellville. And that's where I finished high school, went to college at Arkansas Tech. And then in 1979, right after I graduated from college, I moved to Northwest Arkansas, and I've been here ever since.
Interesting. So, what was Benton County like when you moved here? What year was it, and what was it like? What did you find?
Well, certainly a lot different than it is today, because back then, remember, we only had Highway 71 and up through the mountains, and it was the main drag. We had the lake structure. We had Beaver Lake, but we didn't have XNA Airport. We were still doing aircraft passenger service out of Drake Field in Fayetteville. And then while the university was there, the community college in Rogers wasn't. So I mean, there was it was a lot different than it was back then. But it was I can't remember the population. The census numbers can give you facts and figures on that. But I just remember there were distinctively different characteristics of the cities when you left Fayetteville going north into Springdale, and then past Lowell into Rogers, and then to Bentonville, and then the retirement community of Bella Vista. All distinctively different, all had their Friday night characteristics, high school football, and all competed, pretty intensely for retail development, restaurants, those kinds of things. It had not quite kind of meshed as a region yet. I think it was still pretty much characterized as the Fayetteville area, Northwest Arkansas. And Washington County was the most populous county by far. Benton County trailed in population significantly. Fayetteville was the biggest city. Fort Smith to the south was second largest in the state to Little Rock. And then it was Fayetteville. Springdale was a nice community, kind of old school community. Bentonville obviously was a Walmart kind of centric community. Springdale was a Tyson centric. Rogers, I think the thing that we were most noted for was Daisy air rifles were here, and everybody knew about the Daisy brand. But Rogers didn't really have much more of an identity. It was more of an outlier. to Bentonville, Springdale, Fayetteville, university oriented. And then not too terribly long after I moved up here, of course, my family was in the broadcast business, and I founded with my dad KURM Radio, and I was the guy on November 9th, 1979 at 12 o'clock noon, I remember it well, where I flipped the switch that made that radio station real the very first time. My dad wasn't even up here. I did an interview with him over the phone because he was still working down in the Russellville, Dardanelle area. And so it was a daytime only operation, so I kind of got up there in the morning and worked it all day and then shut it off at night and went home and kind of nurtured it through those growing years. And I worked there from 1979 when we signed on the first time till 1990 when I finally left the organization. But Rogers, Bentonville, Benton County, much different area back then. Walmart had not grown to the extent where we see it today, obviously. The same for Hunt, J.B. Hunt Trucking or Tyson Foods. You didn't have all of the collection of suppliers to Walmart that are now located here. I mean, you can't go a mile in any direction without seeing 2 or 3 famous brands on a side of a building. And look at them right outside my window here. The population was a much smaller, but we knew we were growing, and we knew that with the entrepreneurial spirit of the Waltons, and of course Tyson, J.B. Hunt, that there was a lot of upside to the area. But we were way behind in infrastructure. Like I say, we had Highway 71. We didn't have this 4-lane divided, now I-49. Didn't have that. But as the population began to grow, we started paying attention. And there were some pioneers back in those days. Uvalde Lindsay, comes to mind. I mean, he's a dear, dear friend of mine. And kind of helped set up what we call the Northwest Arkansas Council of people that were not elected, but just, had means and pooled their resources and knew what kind of a growth pattern we needed to get into. And through the work of the council and some of those kind of bold ideas from those pioneers, Northwest Arkansas began to develop pretty rapidly. And so in that decade of the 80s and 90s, this thing really took off. And then it was the late 90s when I was smitten with politics and I'd come out of broadcasting. I'd gone to the University of Arkansas as a member of the cadre of the Army ROTC program for 6 years. Came out and went to work for Merrill Lynch for 2 years for George Westmoreland. And then it was in that second year, in 1998, that I decided I was a member of the city council. I'd gotten elected to the city council. I decided then that I felt like the city needed new leadership, and I made my candidacy known as a candidate for mayor. And wow, people were like, "Why?" And here's this kind of upstart that's going to challenge the incumbent mayor, 1998. And so I made my announcement on Valentine's Day of 1998, and then started knocking on doors. And I found people were very receptive to some new leadership. But here was my argument, Scott. Back to your question about what was it like. Remember, you had 2 counties, Benton County sitting on top of Washington County. But Washington County was the home of the university and the population center, the retail center, where all the good restaurants were, all that kind of stuff. Nothing really. We had Table of the Trout and Rogers, Fred's Hickory Inn in Bentonville, but most everything you would ever want to do from a hospitality or retail standpoint, you had to go to Fayetteville to do. And when I got elected mayor, I had armed myself with a piece of information that nobody truly understood or believed, except that I had the proof. And that was that even though Benton County, we're talking 1998 now, even though Benton County is smaller in population to Washington County, our growth percentage year to year was higher. And so you don't have to have a master's in logic to figure out if the smaller county is growing faster than the larger county, then there's somewhere out there on the graph where it will catch up. And I plotted all of that in the late 90s. And I determined, and I might add, very accurately, that sometime in 2003, Benton County was going to pass Washington County in population. And that was a culture shock to a lot of people there. People just didn't really grasp that, couldn't wrap their head around it. And in the middle of 2003, in my first term as mayor, we finally passed Washington County in population. Now it's not even close. And Benton County continues to grow exponentially faster. And I also knew this, that retail follows rooftops. Retail wants critical mass, people. And we were developing critical mass. And so I knew that eventually there was going to be a new retail destination hospitality center in Northwest Arkansas. And I thought, I'm the mayor of Rogers. We have all this land along Interstate 49. Back then it was just the bypass. And I thought, why couldn't that retail opportunity happen here? And so that's when I began to partner with other like-minded people, including J.B. Hunt and Bill Schweihart, Tim Graham, those people. And I started working with them to manage the area around, where we're doing this interview, up near the Embassy Suites, because it wasn't there at the time, it was under construction. And little by little, we started putting the puzzle pieces in place. And I remember Bill Schweihart telling me one day, Steve, things need to go where they need to go. We don't just take something because it wants to be here. It needs to fit. So that's why I call them puzzle pieces. Embassy Suites was a puzzle piece. We wanted another access point off of I-49, what is now I-49. Perry Road did not exist, or Perry Road did, but the interchange did not exist. So we went after a new interchange where Perry Road is and ended up having to move it about 600 feet to make it work. And now exit 82 off that interstate is one of the busiest in Northwest Arkansas. It puts you right at the front door of Bass Pro Shop, Pinnacle Promenade, Top Golf, where we're sitting here, the AMP. So we started putting the infrastructure in place, and then started recruiting, the kind of retail and hospitality opportunities that we wanted here. And so that meant we had to go to the Vegas Shopping Center Convention, ICSC. We started going in the early 2000s and started making our case. And then, I think this is important to be captured in your project here. Probably the most defining moment in this transformation of the Rogers skyline happened on June, I want to say it was June 21st or June 23rd, 2003. We had come back from the International Shopping Center Convention in Vegas, and we had taken a model of what we wanted to call the Pinnacle Promenade with us. And it was about a 300,000 square foot shopping center, anchored by a Dillard's. And it was not the promenade as you know it today. It was the promenade we first envisioned. And so we come back from the shopping center convention, and I think it was June 21st, 2003, upstairs in this very building on the 6th floor, there were 5 people that met to talk about our project because we had run into some hurdles, i.e., Rogers wasn't showing up on anybody's radar. We weren't big enough yet. But we knew what we had going. Here are the 5 people that were in that meeting. Me, Bill Schweihart, the late Bill Schweihart, who was a prominent developer back then. Bill Clark, prominent builder. J.B. Hunt, and Bill Dillard. Now, 2 of us are left. You know, Mr. Hunt's passed on, Bill Schweihart's passed on, Bill Clark's passed on. But Bill Dillard and Steve Womack are the 2 remaining people. I gave about a 2-minute presentation on what we were trying to, it's a longer presentation, but I got about 2 minutes into it, and Bill Dillard gets up out of his seat, and he walks over to this window upstairs here in this building, and he says, I like everything you guys are doing, but you've just got one problem. And I'm thinking to myself, I've worked awful hard on this. Let me down gently. And he says, you're not thinking big enough. J.B. Hunt's head snapped. And he said, I've never been accused of that. And Bill's looking out the window upstairs on the 6th floor of this building, across the interstate, to an open field, the old Rife farm. And he says, who owns that land over there? And J.B. Hunt says, well, I own 200 acres and I've got an option on the other 200. And he says, well, that's where your project needs to be. It doesn't need to be 300,000 square feet. It needs to be at least 1 million. And I could envision a 2 million square foot over time. Scott, where he was pointing is where the Dillard's department store is today, anchoring that mall. I call it the most defining moment in the skyline change of Rogers because we had a noted retailer, a very wise man, very smart visionary person confirm what we knew, and that is Benton County was changing, Rogers was changing, and we were prepared to usher in that next chapter. And now, look at it. I mean, back then, we couldn't even envision a Top Golf. I'm not even sure Top Golf even existed back then. But we executed really one of the biggest transformation projects in a small community in our country. And it was because we had visionary people involved and we had the means to do it. And I brought the city government along. J.B. Hunt acquired a lot of the land. Bill Schweihart was kind of a carnival barker anyway. You know, he was a promoter. And it just all kind of fell into place. And John Q. Hammonds was not in that meeting, but he was a part of this transformation because he built this beautiful hotel and the convention center. So we were able to put this thing together in a truly remarkable way. And as I look back on it, I'm thinking, I'm not even sure as smart as we were and as visionary as we thought we were. None of us really could envision what we have today. So it's been kind of fun to watch.
Interesting story. So, when you served as mayor, what were some of the other issues that were that you dealt with over the years before, and then what were some of your bigger issues?
Really, what drove me to even run for mayor, as I said, I was on the city council and I was on the finance committee, so I had an idea of what our financials looked like. And look, our revenues were flat. We weren't making very much more. We were growing, but not growing on our balance sheet. And when I did a deeper dive on it, I came to find out that because of some personality issues in the building inspection department in the city was not the city was not capitalizing on the growth opportunities back then. The builders were elsewhere because, as they would tell me, quietly, they didn't want to make anybody mad, but they would say, I can't build in Rogers because every time I build something in Rogers, I have to add about 15 or 20% because of all of the extra hurdles I'm going to have to crawl over. Rogers was just very difficult to work with. So I kind of leaned into that as a member of the city council, and then later as a mayor. And it kind of motivated me to suggest that we needed a change in leadership at the top of the city. And that's what inspired me to run for mayor, is to bring building back to our community because we were missing out on some opportunities. And we were able to win that race in 1998, 57-43. So it was, very decisive. And then I started making changes in that building inspection department. I started, there were a few heads that rolled. We just had to, I gave them a chance. Hey, we got a new leader here. You need to listen to what I'm telling you. And Scott, here was my message. My message was, look, I want to pay you guys more money. I want you to have better earnings. But in order for me to do that, our revenues have to grow. And the only way our revenues are going to grow is if you can find a way to get to yes with these developers. That's it. It's simple. So when we would come into a meeting with a prospective business that's going to build in Rogers, I would have my inspection team there with the architects and the engineers from that company. And I would say to them, all right, we're going to have a discussion here about what you need and what we can provide. And my mandate to my guys is find a way to get to yes. And that started happening. And building came back. And now look at it. So it worked. It was part of a bigger ideology that I had about government. And that is, government is a partner, should be a partner in progress. Shouldn't be out there to just stop things in its tracks, although that's necessary for certain things. But government needs to be lean. Government needs to be, like I say, a partner, needs to be on the team, and trying to find a way to resolve our differences. Simple as that. And if you were going to work on my team in the city of Rogers, you had to have that feeling. And if you didn't, you weren't going to work for us very long. So naturally, some people came and went, and we finally got our crew in place, and good things started happening. And then the government all of a sudden, kind of got user-friendly. And once it got user-friendly, then good things started happening. And that juggernaut, as it became, continued to roll. And I had competing cities around here asking me, how did you do that? And I would, what happened? And I would just say, well, it just took creating a useful or user-friendly government. And that's what we did. And I'd like the same thing to happen in Washington, D.C. I'd like the government to become more user-friendly, because it should be a partner in progress. It shouldn't be out there making the market, nor standing in the way of the market going where the market wants to go. So we did that in Rogers, and we got infrastructure in place, and we developed a can-do attitude, and I tried to lead by example, and I wanted my people to lead by example, and I had a great team in place, and good things happened. And now we're the beneficiaries of that wisdom many years ago. One other thing that I will tell you is that I had I entitled my philosophy, my leadership philosophy, as the mayor after next philosophy. I would tell my staff that when we're out to do something, I want us to do it with the mayor after next in mind. So if we're going to build a new street, if we're going to zone a piece of property, if we're going to build a new fire station, let's do the things now that pay huge dividends a generation from now, when the mayor after next is in office. Because this is how I will define my success as a mayor, is if 2 mayors from now, that mayor is saying, wow, I really appreciate what that mayor did 2 mayors ago, because I'm benefiting from it today. And so that mayor after next philosophy meant that we had short-term ideas and short-term challenges that we needed to meet, but we also had an obligation and the opportunity to think long-term in a lot of this decision-making. And so how we strategically placed roads and bridges and those kinds of things paid huge dividends for us and paved the way for the last actually 20 plus years.
When you were mayor, you worked on a lot of the meetings and committees where you met with the other big city mayors.
Mm-hmm.
And
I chaired the Northwest Arkansas Planning Commission for 2 years. Yeah, I sure did.
And so, talk about whenever that group was trying to get 412 and the big bypass and some of these other things done. 49 done in the airport. And whenever I interviewed David Cameron, he was talking about whenever he went to Washington and whenever they had people from 5 cities there together, how that was bigger. So how did that regionalism and that growth?
Well, David was right that we would that the mayors of Rogers, Bentonville, Springdale, Fayetteville, and then later when Bella Vista became a city and had a mayor, when those mayors would work together, Siloam included, when those mayors would work together, it created the kind of synergy that congressional delegations couldn't ignore. That was the population of Northwest Arkansas. It was coming, their elected leaders were coming in mass. That was very important. And I was grateful to be part of that. Look, we competed, we still had a little bit of a Friday night syndrome. I competed with Bentonville, I competed with Fayetteville, Springdale. But we also recognized that wherever something went, that tide was going to lift everybody's boats. But we all competed for a lot of the same stuff. I won some, I lost some. But look, I can't be more proud of what happened in the city where I was mayor on my watch than what happened in Rogers, Arkansas.
So when you first moved here and were carrying your mic around to interview people, what was the political makeup of the county and how has that changed?
Man, it's like night and day. So back then, if you were going to run for a countywide position, you were a Democrat. I remember Josephine Highland and Al Norwood and Mary Lou Slinkard and those people back when that held those county positions. But pretty much it was a Democrat area. But in the 80s, it began to change. And then there became a time, and I can't remember exactly about when, if I remember correctly, the last person to win countywide in Benton County as a Democrat was either Circuit Judge Sid McCollum, because it was partisan back then, or prosecuting attorney David Klinger. And ironically enough, Klinger later became a Republican and a judge. So the makeup was heavily Democratic countywide, though the representative in Congress, the lone Republican in the federal delegation, was John Paul Hammerschmidt. And then later, Tim Hutchinson, later Asa Hutchinson, later John Bozeman. And for a long time, that was the only Republican in the federal delegation because it was a kind of a Republican area, this 3rd district. And you had Democrats serving in the other Senate, 2 Senate positions and the other 3 House positions. But that was the makeup up here. Washington County and Benton County were heavily Democratic in terms of local population, local elections. But it all changed in that 80s, early 90s time frame. And now it's pretty much 100% Republican in Benton County. And then I'm talking about countywide. And then in Washington County, it's quite a bit that way as well, although there's still some Democrats, I think, still alive and well there in Washington County. But clearly Benton County was the most Republican, later became the most Republican county in the state. May not be that way now. There are some other areas of our state, particularly rural areas, where there is a heavier concentration of very strong, hardcore conservative voters. And it's kind of funny to have watched how a Democrat state like Arkansas flipped and went entirely Republican, and now supermajorities in the legislature and all constitutional offices. So it was a major transformation that happened for sure.
Um, So let's talk about your decision to run for Congress. What made you decide to run, and what are your thoughts about your service there?
Seemed like the right move at the time. I had been mayor for 12 years. I had accomplished more than what I had set out to do. And look, when I Dr. Phil myself, I have to admit that in that 2007, 28, 2009, 10 timeframe, my last term as mayor, I got a bit complacent. Now, nobody accused me of that, but I knew me. And I thought, maybe I need to change the scenery. And then when John Bozeman decided to run for the Senate, that created the open seat in the House, it was like the Lord presented me that opportunity and said, hey, I know you're complacent. I know you think you've done more than you thought you'd ever do. Let's move on to this next level and let's take this show on the road. And that seemed like the right thing to do, and it probably was the right thing to do. Though when I look back on things today, if I'm just brutally honest with you, the best job I ever had was mayor. Was mayor of Rogers. And nothing makes my heart sing more than to hear the word mayor when somebody's addressing me in Washington. John Thune, senator from South Dakota. He knows my background. And when I see John Thune in the hallways in Congress, he doesn't say, hello, Congressman, or hello, Steve. John Thune says, hey, Mayor. And then I've got colleagues of mine in the House that are former mayors that I love dearly. And we joke with one, we call each other Mayor. And best job, hands down, best job ever. I could think of something, get a phone call, a challenge, a complaint in the morning, and by lunch, have it fixed. That's good for the soul. It's good for your self-esteem to get a call from a constituent that said, hey, I called you earlier today about this issue and it's fixed and I want to thank you. I wanted government to work for people. And I could do that as a mayor, not so much as a member of Congress, although I still want government to work. But it's just harder to do when you're just one of 435 people than it is when you're the mayor of a city growing like Rogers. And you know, Scott, I did things that were pretty much atypical of a mayor. Doesn't really fit in their job description, but I had certain pet peeves. I didn't like sitting in traffic when there was an accident. I'd pull over to the side of the road, put my vest on, and I'd direct traffic. I'd move traffic because it's a pet peeve of mine. Another pet peeve of mine was I didn't like roadkill. I didn't like seeing dead animals in our streets more than just a little bit. And so I kept garbage bags and rubber gloves, and I'd pull over and pick up dead animals and put them in a bag and carry them off to the animal shelter for incineration. I would do those kinds of things because I thought it helped our city. And I was witnessed doing that by some people. And people would just marvel about that. And I would think, well, you know, all right, so my pet peeve is politically advantageous to me then. And I mean, there were other things.
Let's talk about, didn't you used to on the first day of this this directing traffic. Deal.
East side.
Didn't you do
East
that?
side.
Talk about your annual tradition.
Yeah, so, well, East Side School was a year-long deal. So in January, right after I took office, I was called, and of course I lived on the east side of town, so I would drive through this area, and I noticed all this traffic backing up on New Hope around East Side School, and so I just pulled in and started directing traffic. Well, it ended up I did it for the entire year, and did it so much that the highway department called and said, "Hey, man, you're in the middle of a state highway directing traffic." And I said, "So what? People are happy. I'm getting traffic. I'd stop traffic and move school buses." And it was fun. And the highway department got so concerned about it, they decided right then and there that they were going to put a turn lane on New Hope and to take me out. And they did. And I was grateful for that. But I became a lifetime member of the East Side PTO because I was so dedicated to them. Hey, there were times it would be sleeting outside in January, and I'd be out there moving traffic. Somebody'd pull up, roll down their window, and hand me a cup of hot chocolate. And then there were occasions where, when it snowed, my police department was being used as a taxi cab by the hospital and others to get people to work. And I had a four-wheel drive truck with the city, and I said, "No, don't call. If the police department gets a call like that, call me, and I'll go get them." Because I had four-wheel drive, and I would do that. Pick these people up, take them in, and I mean, I'd pull up, and they'd say, "Well, you're the mayor." Well, yeah. Well, thank you. Scott, I'll never forget Christmas Day. It's 2003, 4, 5, somewhere in that time frame. I had been taking people back and forth over Christmas night. It had snowed pretty heavily. And I went by the police department dispatch center just to take them some donuts. And one of these 911 calls come in. Never forget this. There I am, and I'm hearing this, and it's a lady panicking because her husband wasn't breathing. And a young lady, like 30s. And so I listened to the whole thing until the paramedics got there and then took over. So after that episode, I left, went home, and was trying to go back to bed. It's about 6:30 in the morning now, and phone rings, it's dispatch, and they said, "Hey, we got a passenger we need you to give a ride home." And I said, "Okay." So, "Well, now this one's kind of in reverse. You're picking them up at the hospital and taking them home." And then this dispatch lady says, "Steve, I got to tell you, this one's going to be hard because this lady just lost her husband." And I said, "Was this the lady that was on the 911 call?" And she said, "Yes." So I pick her up at the hospital, and we're taking her, she lived over by East Side, taking her back home. And I asked her, I just said, "Hey, I'm so sorry for your loss. When we get you home, who's there? You got family?" She goes, "No, sir, just me and my husband." "Do you have friends?" "No, we just moved here." I mean, my heart's breaking. And I thought, can't do this. I can't drop this newly widowed lady off at her house. So I called my wife, and I said, "Honey, get coffee going, because I'm bringing home a guest." And so when I got home, I remember this was right after Christmas, and all I had was, I think our leftovers included some apple pie. And so my wife fed this lady and got her coffee. I had other calls I had to go make. I had other trips to make. And Terry took care of her. She was able to get a hold of her next of kin up in, I think, Nevada, Missouri. And then they were able to come down. By noon, her relatives had made it, even though it was bad roads. And we were able to get her home. Maybe a month later, open my paper, and there is a letter to the editor from this lady, one of the nicest letters to the editor you'll ever read, thanking me for helping a perfect stranger in such a terrible tragedy like that. And those are when I tell you that the best job I ever had was mayor, that's why. Because I knew of things that needed to happen, and I was in a position to cause them to happen. And I don't get many opportunities like that as a member of Congress. So that memory lane has just got all kinds of cool stories about it. That
One of the mayor stories that we haven't touched yet, I don't think, is your service. Talk about that and how that was get called up.
Well, I just remember this was in 2001. I had become a battalion commander of an infantry battalion, and it was only going to last for about 18 months. Pepper Paulson was the brigade commander, and he called me and he said, "Steve, I want you to take over 2nd Battalion, and I'm going to leave you there for about 18 months. And then we're going to put a new commander in, and they're going to go to the JRTC, the Joint Readiness Training Center. But I need you for about 18 months." And that would be enough time for me to check the block for battalion command. And so I remember in the summer of '01, I'm having a training management workshop in Rogers with my staff, my battalion staff. And we had a big argument with the new commander of the 39th Brigade about getting rid of some people who were ghosts on our manning roster. They just never showed up. And I remember having that. And I remember the conversation was something like this: "Steve, you're getting rid of all these people on your manning roster, and that's going to show up in our funding from the DOD, and we're going to lose money on that." And I said, "Well, look, those people are not, they're not deployable assets for me." And I said, "General, my job is to prepare my unit to mobilize. So if they're not going to be mobilization assets, I don't want them on my manning roster." And then I said this to him. I said, "You know what the downside to this is, General? Is that I'm never going to get to prove my point with you that if I was ever mobilized, it would pay huge dividends what I'm doing. But I'm not going to get mobilized." And then what happens? 9/11. And I mean, 2 weeks after 9/11, I get a phone call that says, from my XO, that says, "Hey, there's a rumor going around that a battalion in Arkansas is about to be mobilized for overseas duty. And I think it's the gunslingers." And that was my battalion. And so sure enough, General Ed Soriano called me, commander of 7th ID, and said, "Steve, I had just been with him at summer camp. And he said, "Steve, I'm impressed with your unit. I'm going to send you to Sinai, do the peacekeeping mission over there, and bring you home." And he says, "You guys will do a great job." And that's when I was able to prove to my brigade commander that all those changes I made on my manning roster actually did pay off, because they thought I was going to lose about 30% of my battalion in the call-up, and I really only lost about 5%. So I didn't have to take a whole bunch of extra people. We were able to do it on our own. Anyway, so that said, I told my executive assistant, Wendy Shoemate, I said, "I'm going to name 4 department heads as a team, and then the mayor pro tem, city council member, will be Jack McCaney. And so Wendy, you and these 4 department heads are going to run the city in my absence, and Jack McCaney will be the signatory." And I called them in together, my police chief, my parks director, Morris Coleman, director of transportation and planning, can't remember who the 4th one was, and then my assistant, Wendy. And for the time that I was deployed, better part of a year, they ran the city. Jack signed the documents, and things worked perfectly. And when I came back, it was kind of a hero's welcome, and the city was in good shape. I ran for re-election without opposition, and things went wonderfully. But the city was awful good to me. But I took steps to make sure that the city was covered, and I had competent people. By then, 2003, I'd been there 4 years. So I'm sorry, 2001, this is 2 years in, I had a kind of a nucleus of really strong department heads. And there were holdovers from the previous administration that were capable of doing this work. And they did it masterfully. But they were glad to see me come back too. That was not a long-term solution, but it served in the short term very well.
Any other memories as mayor before we move on?
Ice storm, clearly 2009, crippled the area. And we did a better job than any city around us of getting our debris to the curb so that the FEMA authorized haulers could pick it up. And I was told it would take 2 or 3 passes in the city to get it all picked up. And because of a volunteer a day of volunteerism on a Saturday, we were able to get probably 95% of the yard waste and debris, down limbs, branches, stuff like that, to the curb, so that when the FEMA authorized haulers came through, they were able to do it in one swath, one pass. And then I started getting calls from Springdale and Bentonville saying, it doesn't look like anything happened in Rogers, but over here, we still look like a war zone. What was the secret? Well, you know what the secret was, Scott? The secret was my street superintendent and I were out driving one day right after the storm, and a lady had called in and said she had a down power line in her backyard. So we went over there to check it out, and it was just a cable TV cable. But I said to Frankie at the time, Frankie, the FEMA authorized haulers cannot come back on this private property. So how will a little old lady like this get all this stuff out to her curb? And his response was, well, unless we get a whole bunch of people mobilized to pick it up, it ain't gonna happen. So I go back to the office, get with Wendy and my team, and I say, we're gonna have a call to service day on Saturday, and we're gonna do this like a military operation. We're gonna quarter the city, we're gonna have chainsaws, and we're gonna have gas oil mixes, paramedics, and I'm gonna invite every football team, every Boy Scout troop, every civic club to join us, and then we're gonna put out a call to the city that if you have any debris in your yard that you would like moved to the curb, call this number and we'll schedule you on that Saturday. And on one day, we picked up virtually the entire city, got it to the curb, and then the next week, the FEMA haulers, it was gone in a week. And that was one of my favorite memories of how we executed that we called it Operation something. I don't know really what it was. Maybe Operation Cleanup. But again, my team was just remarkable in their ingenuity, and then we had restaurants donate food to feed everybody, and it just worked. It was a great day for the city, 2009.
Good story. You talked earlier about the Northwest Arkansas Council. Let's talk about, and you mentioned some about the Waltons. What can you say about the enormous impact of Walton family and the Walmart and the foundation?
Dictionary doesn't have any words for that. It just doesn't. The impact of that man and his wife and his brother and his kids and their kids. I can't describe it in terms that would make sense and do it justice. Can't. But I will say this, it taught not just this region, but it serves as a lesson to the country of what an entrepreneurial spirit can actually do. And Sam Walton did that. I had the privilege of knowing Sam, and I every day now I just admire what he was able to accomplish. Sometimes against pretty pretty great odds. And a lot of people just think, well, this fell in your lap. But it didn't. It was hard work, and there was a lot of dedication, and there was some sacrifice. And then later, J.B. Hunt, who became like a father figure to me, and John L. today, a mother figure to me. Those people, life is good right now, except for the passing of J.B. back in '06. But right now, J.B. Hunt Trucking, that integrated logistics company is, stocks been trading up over $200 a share. I mean, there's nothing. I mean, that is a remarkable company. But you know what? They had their hardships, and there were times that company thought that it may not survive. I'm just saying that. But you ask about the Waltons. I will tell you that you can't look in any direction, and you will see visible evidence of the impact of what Sam Walton did in this region and for this region. And it continues to thrive even today through his grandchildren. And I am eternally grateful for it. I don't take it for granted. And they have enjoyed a lot of success, and they've poured a lot of that success not only back into the Northwest Arkansas area, but elsewhere as well. They helped me expand my Rogers Youth Center with a challenge grant. They've built trail after trail after trail. I mean, hundreds of miles of trails in this area, and they continue to do things that are you can't duplicate, and a great success story. So I'm grateful. That's why I say the dictionary doesn't have enough superlatives to be able to describe the impact of this Walton phenomenon.
Before I get to the last couple of questions, did you have anything you wanted to say maybe that I hadn't thought to ask about?
No, other than the fact that, unlike a lot of areas in the country that I visit, this area is its calling card is its entrepreneurial spirit. We don't need a lot of government up here. In fact, less government is better. All we want is the opportunity to do what we know how to do best, and that's make a living and dedicate ourselves to the ideals of good governance, quality of place, strategic investment, and live within your means, and hard work and dedication, and just on and on and on. That's what an entrepreneurial spirit will do for you. It will create that kind of area. And so I think that's kind of the secret sauce behind what we've got going for us in Northwest Arkansas. That's the only thing I would say that differs even from other parts of Arkansas. You don't get that same feeling when you visit some of the other areas of our state.
If someone came to you, say in Washington, which may have happened, and said, Congressman Womack, tell me about Northwest Arkansas. What's it like? Or Benton County. They said, tell me about Benton County. What would you tell them?
Well, I would tell them it's got a lot of big city qualities with a small city characteristic. That about the only thing we don't have up here is what I would call major league sports, though that's changing. I mean, we now have a AA baseball affiliate here. We're going to get some professional soccer. There'll be some other things that will happen over time as the population grows. Some of that's population dependent, but we do have the Razorbacks, which is our professional sports, if you will. I would just tell them 4 seasons, lots of natural scenic beauty, can-do attitude, home for some of America's great titans, Walmart, Tyson, Hunt. 4 seasons, as I mentioned, that you're going to get the opportunity to enjoy a mixture of different weather patterns that come through here. Beautiful springs, picturesque falls, some cold in the summer, in the winter time, maybe a snow or two. Downside, hot summers and high humidity, but hey, not for a very long period of time. And a group of people up here that some of whom have come here kicking and screaming, and then have to leave kicking and screaming because they fall in love with the area. Great schools, great health care, as I said, good governance, just the mix of all of the things that you would like to see that are characteristic of a big city but with a small town atmosphere. And that's what I would say. And then you can go to places like Crystal Bridges, or visit the Buffalo National River, or or Beaver Lake, and just be outside and enjoy what the good Lord has provided and what we have been good caretakers of.
If you had to put it in one sentence, and you said, my favorite thing about Benton County is, how would you say it?
My favorite thing about Benton County is it is my home. It's where I belong. It's what I've spent my adult life's work trying to improve. And it's an area that I would have a hard time leaving. But for all of the other reasons that we just spoke of, whether it's good government, lots of natural scenic beauty, an entrepreneurial spirit that you won't find hardly anywhere, and a quality of life with good health care and infrastructure getting better. We don't have rush hours, we have rush minutes. We have periods of congestion, but not long term. But the most remarkable thing about this county, in my opinion, is its entrepreneurial heritage, led by titans of industry: Walton, Tyson, Hunt, Hammonds, Hudson, and others. Just remarkable people that kind of know what right looks like and willing to make very courageous decisions, visionary decisions, and fade the heat when necessary, and make things happen. That's just what is priceless to me about Benton County.